Welcome back, everyone, and happy Tuesday. Today, I've got my husband George with me, and we're going to find out just how much he knows about beginner sewing terminology. Because I feel like I talk to him a lot. Is he listening to me?
Maybe.
Do you want to know how he does on his little quiz? Well, friends, you've got to stick around. I'm Nye
And George.
with Ellieandmac. We'll see you in a second. All right, friends, I'm glad you came back. I have my spouse here, George, hanging out with me, having a little bit of coffee on this Tuesday because coffee is my favorite.
Coffee's
We
good.
all know that. So we're going to see how many terms he can actually figure out. He may not know the term, but I've already explained to him. Just give me your best guess, okay? So let's see how this is going to go. Beginner's terminology is very important when you begin sewing. We know that if you're going to sew a garment, you need to understand the pattern that you're sewing. And a lot of these terms are within the instructions of your pattern. When I started sewing, it was Google a palooza because I had no clue what any of that was. So hopefully this can help you. And maybe you'll have a little giggle and a little bit of fun with me and George. Yeah? All right. First term, backstitch. What's a backstitch, George?
A backstitch is not a front stitch. It's, I'm assuming a stitch on the right side of a fabric. Yeah?
Backstitch is basically, oh, and you're not getting any points for that, Nancy. A backstitch is basically when you sew backwards 2 or 3 times in order to secure your stitch. You must do that because your seams may come apart and nobody wants their clothes falling off in public, right? Right.
Okay.
Okay. So the next term is baste. What is a baste or to baste?
It's like priming a turkey, basting a turkey.
In the 19 years that we have been married, have you ever seen me baste my fabric in the form
Well, I was trying to associate the word baste
of a poultry?
and I associate basting with food. However, fabric basting, I would say, I don't know. That's a hard word. It's kind of a weird one for me. So,
Okay. So actually, it's a pretty good way to think about it because when you baste a turkey, you're covering it in like a juice that's in the pan in order to seal all the juices in, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So when you're basting your fabric, you're basically sewing a very loose stitch around areas that you're going to secure later. So you're holding all the goodness in.
Okay. It's making me
Yeah.
kind of hungry, but
Okay.
sounds good.
Okay, next term is clip. What does it mean to clip?
Clip, put together.
Clip?
Clip.
Oh, he's talking about my snack clips, y'all. No. Okay, a clip is basically if you have sewn a curved edge and you want to have that curved edge to have a little bit more give, a little bit more movement, you just basically put little snips in the curve right up to your stitch line, but not through your stitch line, right? Not through the stitches.
Okay, well, totally had a different definition to the word clip, but I guess in the fabric world, it's not that.
No, not quite. Anyway, what does it mean to finish seams?
Finish seam. I mean, you finish a seam. Put together a piece of item, clothing, joining it together and it's complete or finished.
Not quite. So when you're joining seams together, like George so eloquently did with his hands, you're creating a seam. When you finish the seam, that just means that you're either creating a serged edge on your raw edge, or you're rolling your raw edge, or some other way of preserving your raw edge so that it doesn't fray. Unless it's a knit, because we all know knits don't fray. Love a knit. Okay?
Okay.
All right. So there's lots of ways that you can do it, but it's really up to you. To gather.
To gather? Oh, well, to accumulate.
Yes!
That was
okay.
Easy.
Yes, that's very good. Okay, so to gather, it's basically to create a ruffling in your fabric. So essentially what you would do is either use a ruffler foot, a gathering foot, or you would use a long stitch with a very high tension, and your machine would gather it for you, right? Okay, to grade a seam. Now remember what a seam is.
I think so. Grading, okay, so grading, I've been doing a lot of yard work.
Yes, he has.
It's leveling or evening out the surface. So with fabric, I'm assuming you're evening out a fabric surface?
Sort of. When you're grading seams, you're basically taking the seam and cutting 1/2 of your seam allowance back. So that's a little bit shorter than your other seam allowance, and that kind of minimizes the amount of bulk in your seam. Have you ever seen what people do with yarn and those 2 sticks?
Yeah, you knit them.
Okay, so now take that and consider if it was a fabric.
So you put together 2 different fabrics together?
Okay, this is way too easy. Knit fabric is essentially one long thread that is knit together to create a fabric. Okay, and so that fabric actually ends up being stretchy.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and the opposite of that, I suppose, would be a woven. A woven is another fabric, but that fabric doesn't stretch because it's kind of interwoven in a crosshatch kind of way. So it can't stretch. There's no way for it to stretch.
Okay.
Raw edge.
The loose ends of the end of a piece of fabric.
Yes! Get that man a cookie. A raw edge is basically the untreated edge of your fabric. How do you know what is the right side of the fabric and what is the wrong side of the fabric?
The right side, I will say, is the smoother surface of the fabric, the usable side. This is the side you conceal by keeping it inwards.
Okay. Right side and wrong side sometimes can be determined by the person with the fabric. There are so many fabrics where the right side and wrong side both have different benefits, like French terry. French terry generally will have a loop on the inside, and then on the outside it might be brushed and soft. Well, you may want the loops on the outside of your garment, but you know that that's actually the wrong side of the fabric, right? Right. With woven fabrics, you're generally going to find that the right side is the side with the pattern on it, and the wrong side is the side that has no pattern or print. A lot of knits tend to roll to the right side of the fabric. So for this, it might be helpful when you're using a solid color like a cotton lycra, which, let's be real, most people have no clue whether you've put that fabric on backwards or not. I mean, who's up in there besides Nancy with this huge mark, like, what are those called? The
magnifying glass?
Yes, magnifying glass, like all up in your grill. Why you all in my grill? Okay, sorry, little Missy Ellie moment. What is a stay stitch?
Oh, a stitch that doesn't move. Stays there.
Word. It stays put. Okay, so a stay stitch is a stitch that you use, basically a long stitch that you would use on a woven fabric curve in order to help that fabric maintain its shape. You want it to stay. What is a seam allowance?
Unlimited amount of seams needed.
Unlimited amount of seams.
An abundance of seams.
Your seam allowance is basically the amount of fabric you have from your raw edge to where you sew. So a lot of patterns will have a 1/2 inch, a 5/8 inch, a 3/8 inch, or something like that. Then you just know that you need to sew that much distance from the free edge or raw edge of your fabric. Okay, what is stitch length?
I'm sorry. Stitch length.
Yes.
Well, I guess just extra stitch, longer stitch.
Yes. Stitch length is variable when you're sewing. It basically is the way your machine will pull your fabric through, and sometimes that could mean a long stitch, and sometimes that could mean a really, really short stitch. A top stitch.
A top stitch, well, it's not a bottom stitch, so, well, I guess just a stitch that's closest to the top.
Not even.
Okay. I don't know.
You're getting 0 cookies out of
Okay.
this. Top stitch can be a decorative stitch, or it's just a stitch that's gonna hold your seam allowance in place on your garment. And they call it a top stitch because it goes on top of the fabric, or on the right side, right?
Okay. Yep, that's right.
Understitch.
Okay. It's a stitch that goes on the wrong side of the fabric. Is it right?
Yes.
Oh, look at that.
Okay. So understitch is when you have your garment wrong sides out and you sew your seam allowance to the lining of your garment. And then when you flip it right sides out, your lining stays in. So, you know, the shirt's not like, hey, everybody, look at the lining. No seam allowance.
Yes.
Don't nobody want to.
What time is it?
Oh my God. Please help me. Nobody wants to see your lining except this guy right here.
Very nice.
Just my lining, not your lining. Okay. Bias. What is the bias?
I don't know. Fabric that doesn't discriminate?
That's cute. That's really cute. No. The bias on your fabric is your 45-degree angle. And while we're at it, so your grain line runs parallel to your selvage and your cross grain runs perpendicular, while your bias runs at a 45-degree angle. Can you tell me what a selvage is?
A salvage?
Selvage.
Selvage? It runs at a, I don't know, 20-degree angle?
Selvage. Oh. So the selvage is the manufactured edge of your fabric. This is where your fabric has essentially been holding onto a machine. So it generally will have a marking. Some fabrics, custom fabrics will have like numbers, or it will have a color swatch on the side where you know exactly what colors are inside the print, that kind of thing.
I feel like I should have prepared myself better for this quiz.
I kind of feel like maybe I should have prepared him better for this because, y'all, I thought he was going to get more of those answers. So when I'm talking to you about sewing, are you going to be paying attention?
I'm going to have to. I feel like you're putting me on the spot.
Aww, y'all.
But I'm learning a lot, so that's good.
Yay. Sometimes it's kind of cool to share your craftiness with one another. You know, he talks to me about grass and airplanes all day long. I hope that the majority of you beginning sewists actually do better on this quiz than my husband did. I hope you had a good time hanging out with us and our little bit of coffee. I hope that you enjoy the rest of your week. If you like our content, please come back, subscribe, comment, like, share with your friends, because I'm going to be here every Tuesday. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to be here every Tuesday. I'd like to see you there too. How about that? And while you're at it,
So
the things. Oh.
All the things.
Bye.
How's my hair?
You look gorgeous. with Ellieandmac.